Let me ask you a question, Chris. Would you be surprised? Done some things over there that you wish you hadn't?
Oh, that's not me, no.
What have you under such a...
Might happen.
Drop it.
It's sad.
You're home? What?
Hey! Tend to my daughter, please, right now!
Oh my God!
I'm ready to come home.
Hook. Think American Sniper is just another war movie? Think again. Discover the shocking true story, hidden facts, and whether this Oscar nominated film deserves the hype. Welcome to Kali Facts. Let's uncover the truth behind American Sniper 2014. American Sniper is a 2014 American war drama based on the real life story of Chris Kyle, one of the most famous snipers in US military history. The movie was directed and co-produced by Clint Eastwood, while Jason Hall wrote the screenplay based on Chris Kyle's memoir, which he wrote with Scott McEwan and Jim DeFelice. The story follows Kyle's journey through four tours during the Iraq War, where he became known as the deadliest sniper in US military history, with 255 claimed kills, including 160 officially confirmed by the US Department of Defense. Even though Kyle earned a lot of respect for his service and battlefield success, the movie also shows how the stress of war deeply affected his personal life, his marriage, and his relationship with his family. Bradley Cooper plays Chris Kyle, while Sienna Miller stars as his wife, Taya Kyle. The supporting cast includes Luke Grimes, Jake McDormand, Corey Hardrick, Kevin Latch, Navid Negahban, and Keir O'Donnell. The movie first premiered at the American Film Institute Festival on November 11, 2014. It had a limited release in US theaters on Christmas Day, December 25, 2014, through Warner Bros. Pictures, before opening nationwide on January 16, 2015. Most critics gave the film positive reviews, especially praising Bradley Cooper's powerful performance as Chris Kyle and Clint Eastwood's direction. At the same time, the movie also sparked a lot of debate because of how it portrayed the Iraq War and Chris Kyle himself. Despite the controversy, American Sniper became a huge box office hit, earning more than $547 million worldwide. It ended up as the 13th highest grossing movie of 2014 and became the biggest box office success of Clint Eastwood's career at the 87th Academy Awards. American Sniper received 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Actor for Bradley Cooper. In the end, The film won the Academy Award for Best Sound Editing, adding another major achievement to its long list of accomplishments. Chris Kyle grows up in Texas, where his dad Wayne teaches him how to hunt deer and shoot a rifle. More importantly, his father teaches him to always protect people who can't defend themselves and never back down from bullies. Those lessons stay with Chris for the rest of his life. Years later, Chris becomes a rodeo cowboy. One day, he comes home early and catches his girlfriend cheating on him. After ending the relationship, he spends time with his younger brother Jeff. While watching the news, they see coverage of the 1998 US Embassy bombings. The attack has a huge impact on Chris, and he decides to join the US Navy. Even though he's already 30 years old, he successfully completes the tough Navy SEAL training and becomes a sniper. Chris strongly believes it's his duty to serve and protect his country, which he sees as the greatest nation in the world. Before being deployed, Chris meets Taya Studebaker at a bar. At first, Taya isn't interested because she thinks military guys, especially Navy SEALs, are cocky and full of themselves. But Chris wins her over with his respectful attitude, kindness, and sense of humor. They start dating, fall in love, and eventually get married. Not long after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, Chris is sent to Iraq. He tells Taya he'll only be gone for about 6 weeks. During his very first mission, Chris faces an impossible decision. He sees a woman and a young boy carrying a grenade toward a group of US Marines. Knowing they could kill many soldiers, Chris is forced to take the shot. The heartbreaking moment shakes him deeply, but his quick thinking saves many lives. Because of his incredible shooting skills and his ability to spot danger before anyone else, he quickly earns the nickname Legend. Chris works closely with a Marine nicknamed Goat Winston, who helps protect him while he provides sniper cover. Meanwhile, the American forces begin hearing about Mustafa, a highly skilled Syrian sniper and former Olympic shooter who has been killing American soldiers from long distances. Back home, Taya becomes pregnant with their first child. She struggles with Chris being so far away and constantly worries about his safety as reports of American casualties continue to grow. Chris also learns that his younger brother Jeff has been deployed to Iraq, making the war feel even more personal. Chris is later assigned to help track down Abu Musab al Zarqawi, one of the most dangerous terrorist leaders in Iraq. Zarqawi commands thousands of fighters, and American forces begin searching neighborhood house by house to find him and his top commanders. Tired of seeing young Marines getting killed, Chris decides to leave his sniper position and join soldiers on the ground during dangerous raids. During one house search, a local father agrees to help the SEALs find a brutal terrorist known as the Butcher in exchange for a large reward. The Butcher is infamous for torturing people with a power drill. Sadly, the rescue mission goes horribly wrong. The father and his son are captured and brutally murdered, while Chris is pinned down by enemy sniper fire from a Dragunov rifle. After the incident, the insurgents place a bounty on Chris, making him one of their biggest targets. Chris eventually returns home for the birth of his son, but it's clear the war has changed him. He struggles with painful memories and can't fully enjoy being with his family. Taya notices he is emotionally distant and they begin arguing after Chris watches disturbing videos showing American soldiers being killed. She begs him to focus on his family instead of staying mentally trapped in the war. Soon afterward, Chris returns to Iraq for his second tour after being promoted to Chief Petty Officer. During this deployment, he once again comes face to face with the Butcher during a major firefight. When Chris returns home after that tour, he meets his newborn daughter, but the emotional distance between him and his family grows even larger. On his third deployment, tragedy strikes again. His close friend Ryan Biggles' job is seriously wounded by the enemy sniper using the Dragunov rifle. Shortly afterward, fellow Navy SEAL Mark Lee is killed during combat. Losing close friends fills Chris with guilt and convinces him that he needs to go back for one more deployment. Taya is heartbroken by his decision and tells him she needs her husband more than the military does. For a moment, it seems like their marriage may not survive another tour. During his fourth deployment, the mysterious enemy sniper is finally identified as Mustafa. Chris and his sniper team are sent deep into enemy territory with one mission to eliminate him. While hiding on a rooftop, Chris spots Mustafa from an incredible distance. He takes an extremely difficult shot from about 2,100 yards away and successfully kills him, making one of the longest sniper shots ever shown in military history. However, the shot gives away his team's location and they are immediately surrounded by enemy fighters. Running low on ammunition, Chris calls Taya during the battle and tells her he's finally ready to come home. A massive sandstorm suddenly sweeps across the battlefield, giving the team just enough cover to escape. Although Chris is injured during the chaotic retreat, after returning home for good, Chris finds it nearly impossible to adjust to normal life. Loud noises, painful memories, and the loss of so many fellow soldiers continue to haunt him. During a meeting with a Veterans Affairs psychiatrist, Chris admits that what hurts him the most isn't the people he killed, but the soldiers he couldn't save. The psychiatrist encourages him to spend time helping wounded veterans instead of isolating himself. Chris begins taking injured veterans to shooting ranges, helping them rebuild their confidence while slowly healing himself at the same time. Little by little, he starts reconnecting with Taya and their children years later. On February 2nd, 2013, Chris happily says goodbye to his wife and children before leaving to meet another military veteran named Eddie Ray Roth at a shooting range. Chris hopes to help him the same way he had helped many other veterans. Sadly, that day ends in tragedy. Chris is shot and killed by the very veteran he was trying to support. The movie closes with real footage of thousands of people standing along highways during his funeral procession, while even more gather inside Cowboy Stadium to honor his life and military service. Bradley Cooper's attachment to the project as both producer and lead actor formed the foundation of the casting process for American Sniper. Warner Bros. Acquired the rights to Chris Kyle's memoir in May 2012, with Cooper set to produce through his 22nd and Indiana banner and ultimately star as the Navy SEAL. Cooper initially expressed reservations about taking the role himself, noting his Philadelphia background and lighter frame at the time contrasted with Kyle's imposing Texas physique. He considered Chris Pratt for the part, believing the actor possessed the physical presence suited to a hulking SEAL. Studio conditions required Cooper's commitment to star in order to secure the acquisition, locking him into the central role early. Cooper's preparation for the role became one of the most discussed elements of the production's casting and performance approach. He underwent an intensive physical transformation, gaining nearly 40 pounds of muscle through a rigorous regimen involving daily workouts lasting several hours and significant calorie intake under trainer Jason Walsh. Dialect coach Tim Monich worked with him extensively on the West Texas accent, employing daily exercises that included tongue twisters, song variations such as Robert Earl Keen's Feelin' Good Again, and targeted phonetic drills to ensure the drawl emerged naturally. Cooper immersed himself in Kyle's personal materials, including home videos and emails provided by the family, and trained with firearms under the guidance of actual SEALs to master sniper techniques and body positioning. This level of commitment established a high standard that influenced subsequent casting decisions as the production sought performers capable of matching the authenticity demanded by the lead. The role of Taya Rene Kyle required careful selection to balance the domestic and emotional core of the story against the combat sequences. In March 2014, Sienna Miller entered talks and secured the part after a competitive process. Eastwood evaluated her against Jamie Alexander, with Kate Mara having been an early contender before scheduling conflicts with Fantastic Four removed her from consideration. During the earlier period when Steven Spielberg was attached, Evangeline Lilly had been rumored as a front owner. Miller submitted a taped audition, consistent with Eastwood's preference against in person readings stemming from his own experiences as an actor. Once cast, she prepared by Skyping extensively with the real Taya Kyle, meeting the Kyle children and introducing her own daughter to the family during an in person meeting in Los Angeles. Taya Kyle later commented on the ease of their connection and Miller's quick grasp of the emotional demands. Supporting family roles received targeted casting to ground the narrative in Kyle's Texas upbringing and personal relationships. Ben Reed portrayed Wayne Kyle, Chris's father, delivering the pivotal sheep wolf sheepdog speech that frames the character's worldview. Reed researched the role by consulting family members with military experience, including his brother who served and his father who had watched a son deploy. He auditioned with the deer hunting and dinner table scenes, receiving the offer roughly 6 weeks later. Elise Robertson played Debbie Kyle, the mother, while Cole Conis appeared as young Chris Kyle and Luke Sunshine as young Jeff Kyle. Keir O'Donnell took the role of adult Jeff Kyle, Chris's brother. Max Charles joined in June 2014 as Colton Kyle, the couple's son, bringing prior experience from the Amazing Spider Man films and The Neighbors. These choices emphasized familial authenticity, with performers selected for their ability to convey the strains of repeated deployments without overshadowing the central relationship. The SEAL team ensemble formed a critical component of the casting, requiring actors who could portray the tight knit dynamics of elite operators. Jake McDormand was cast as Ryan Biggles' Job, a role that involved depicting the character's injury and subsequent death, elements drawn from real events. Luke Grimes secured the part of Mark Lee in late March 2014, learning of the opportunity shortly before production and preparing rapidly for the Morocco shoot. Corey Hardrick joined as D.T. Dandridge around the same period. Kyle Gallner was announced as Goat Winston, an Arkansas native nicknamed for an early accidental kill of a goat. Eric Ladin portrayed Squirrel Case, described as a Southern California surfer type within the team. Reynaldo Gallegos, credited as Ray Gallegos, played Tony, a chief and training instructor. Sam Yeager appeared as Navy SEAL Lieutenant Martin or Captain Martens in some listings. These actors participated in a condensed boot camp style preparation to approximate SEAL teamwork, weapons handling, and movement, though nothing approaching actual BARD such training. Authenticity extended to the inclusion of actual military personnel in the cast. Kevin Dauber Lach, a former Navy SEAL who served alongside Kyle on deployments, initially joined as a technical advisor. During training sessions, Cooper encouraged him to play himself after observing his natural presence. Latz submitted an iPhone audition with coaching from screenwriter Jason Hall and received the role. He later reflected on the parallel between Eastwood's on screen history of confronting antagonists and his own real world experience. Joel Lambert, another former SEAL, portrayed a Delta sniper. Additional veterans from groups such as Veterans in Media and Entertainment secured smaller roles after the casting department reviewed profiles and invited auditions. Ricky Riber, a Navy veteran, appeared as a Cobra pilot after direct outreach based on his VME listing. Paul Meixner, an Army veteran, played CPL Taggart, and Leon Charles Farmer, a Marine Corps veteran, took the part of LCPL Roach. These inclusions reinforced the production's commitment to grounded portrayals. Antagonist and supporting Iraqi roles required performers capable of conveying complex, often adversarial figures without reducing them to stereotypes. Navid Negaban was cast as Sheikh Al-Abedi or Al-Abodi, an Iraqi local offering assistance to the SEALs for a fee. He joined in March 2014 alongside several others. Sami Sheikh portrayed Mustafa, the rival sniper, partially inspired by the real life figure known as Juba. Mido Hamada played the Butcher, a character possibly drawing from Abu Dera, depicted as a ruthless enforcer. Fahim Fazli appeared as a messianic tribal leader. Asaf Cohen and Fade Benchemsi took interpreter roles. These selections drew from actors with experience in Middle Eastern characters across television and film, contributing to the layered depiction of the conflict environment. Additional military and peripheral roles filled out the ensemble. Chance Kelly played Lieutenant Cole. Jones, Tim Griffin appeared as Colonel Gronsky, and Brian Hallisey as Captain Gillespie. Leonard Roberts portrayed Instructor Roll, Billy Miller, the Navy recruiter, and Eric Close as DI Agent Sneed. Brando Eaton took the part of a dapper Navy man, James Ryan as Payo Kaman, and Owain Yeoman as Ranger 1. Smaller credited and uncredited parts included numerous Marines, veterans, family members, and civilians, with actors such as Marnette Patterson as Sarah, Kathy Mazur as Dr. Hollerman, and Jonathan Groff as a young veteran. Clint Eastwood himself made an uncredited appearance as a churchgoer. The breadth of the cast reflected the film's dual focus on combat operations and home front consequences. The casting timeline clustered tightly around March 2014 as production approached. Sienna Miller's involvement solidified on March 14. Kyle Gallner followed on March 16, Corey Hardrick on March 18. On March 20, Navid Negaban, Eric Close, Eric Ladin, Ray Gallegos, and Jake McDormand were announced. Luke Grimes and Sam Yeager joined by March 25. Max Charles arrived later in June for the child role. Principal photography began March 31 in Los Angeles, with Morocco sequences following. This compressed schedule demanded rapid decisions and limited traditional audition processes for some supporting players, relying instead on taped submissions, agency recommendations, and Eastwood's established preferences for efficient casting. Eastwood's directing style shaped the overall approach. He favored minimal fuss, often avoiding lengthy in person auditions and preferring actors who could deliver prepared work efficiently. The production's emphasis on realism, driven by Cooper's own method preparation and the involvement of technical advisors, prioritized performers who could handle physical demands, military vernacular, and emotional restraint. Boot camp sessions for the SEAL ensemble and direct consultation with Kyle's family and surviving teammates further informed selections. Real SEALs in the cast and crew provided ongoing feedback on posture, language, and operational details, elevating the collective authenticity beyond what a purely civilian ensemble might have achieved. The physical and emotional transformation required of the principal cast set a tone that permeated supporting choices. Cooper's weight gain and accent work created a visual and vocal benchmark. Miller's immersion with the Kyle family mirrored the research expected of others, portraying real individuals. Actors playing fallen seals carried the additional weight of representing actual service members whose families remained connected to the project. The inclusion of veterans in both speaking and background roles extended this principle into the ensemble, creating layers of lived experience visible on screen. Secondary characters, such as the Navy recruiter, instructors, and various officers, received casting that supported the progression of Kyle's journey from civilian to elite operator. Billy Miller's recruiter and Leonard Roberts' instructor role helped establish the institutional framework of SEAL selection and training. Officers portrayed by Chance Kelly, Tim Griffin, and Brian Hallisey provided command structure during deployments. These roles, while smaller, required actors comfortable with military protocol and capable of conveying authority under pressure. The antagonist casting contributed to the film's tension through specific physical and performative qualities. Sami Sheikh's Mustafa functioned as a shadowy counterpart. His Olympic background sharpshooter status emphasizing skill parity. Mido Hamada's Butcher embodied brutality in interrogation and execution sequences. Negaban's Sheikh navigated the ambiguous loyalties of local collaborators. Together, these performances avoided one dimensional villainy, aligning with the screenplay's focus on the personal cost of prolonged conflict. Family and Homefront casting balanced the operational intensity. The young actors portraying the Kyle children, Max Charles, Cole Conis, Luke Sunshine, and others in fleeting scenes, needed to register the emotional distance created by repeated absences. Reed and Robertson, as the parents, supplied the foundational values that Kyle carries into adulthood. O'Donnell as Jeff provided a sibling counterpoint, reflecting different responses to the same upbringing and the shared burden of a high risk career. Peripheral civilian roles, including receptionists, doctors, neighbors, and funeral attendees, filled logistical and atmospheric needs. Uncredited appearances by actors such as Brad Abrell as a September 11 newscaster and various extras as soldiers' families and rodeo attendees rounded out the world. The production's use of Moroccan locations and local extras for Iraqi sequences further integrated practical casting with environmental authenticity. The overall casting strategy reflected a hybrid of star driven packaging and documentary like fidelity. Cooper's dual role as producer and lead ensured continuity from development through performance. Eastwood's efficient methods accelerated the process once he replaced Spielberg. The deliberate recruitment of real SEALs and veterans injected credibility that pure dramatic casting might have lacked. Resulting performances, particularly Cooper's transformation and the ensemble's cohesive military portrayal became central to the film's reception and awards recognition, including Cooper's Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. Later announcements and confirmations continued to refine the ensemble after principal photography began. The addition of Max Charles in June allowed for family scenes to be completed with appropriate age casting. Ongoing technical advising by Latch and others influenced not only performance notes but also the credibility of smaller military parts filled during production. The final credited cast, verified across multiple databases, encompassed more than 80 performers in speaking or featured roles, with dozens more uncredited, illustrating the scale required to depict both battlefield operations and the broader personal consequences of service. Cooper's early doubts about his suitability resolved through physical and vocal preparation parallel the challenges faced by supporting actors adapting to military roles. Grimes's last-minute casting for Mark Lee demanded accelerated readiness. McDormand's portrayal of Biggles required navigating the sensitive depiction of injury and loss based on a real individual. Gallner's Goat Winston brought a specific regional flavor that humanized one member of the team. Each choice contributed incremental layers of specificity to the collective portrait of SEAL Team 3. The competitive nature of the Taya Kyle casting underscored the importance placed on the domestic storyline. Miller's selection over other strong candidates signaled a preference for an actress capable of conveying both strength and vulnerability across the emotional arc of separation, reunion, and growing strain. Her subsequent collaboration with Taya Kyle ensured details of mannerism, speech, and relationship dynamics informed the performance beyond the scripted pages. In parallel, the antagonist roles demanded actors who could sustain menace and capability without caricature. Sheikh's Mustafa and Hamada's Butcher provided the necessary opposing force to Kyle's legend status, while Negaban's Sheikh introduced moral complexity into the intelligence gathering sequences. These performances operated within the constraints of the film's point of view, yet the casting sought performers with the range to suggest fuller lives beyond the confrontations shown. The integration of veterans into the cast extended authenticity into the fabric of the production. Latch's dual function as advisor and on screen presence created a direct bridge between lived experience and dramatic representation. Lambert's Delta sniper role and the smaller parts filled by VME members and other service members added texture that trained actors alone might not have supplied. This approach aligned with broader industry efforts to include veterans in storytelling about military subjects, while serving the specific needs of Eastwood's realistic aesthetic. Casting for the younger versions of Chris and Jeff Kyle required performers who could establish the childhood foundation for the adult characters. Conies and Sunshine conveyed the early hunting lessons and sibling dynamics that later informed adult choices. These brief appearances carried disproportionate weight in establishing the sheepdog philosophy central to the narrative. The breadth of the supporting military cast, ranging from instructors and recruiters to officers and fellow operators, created a hierarchical and operational continuum. Roberts, Miller, Kelly, Griffin, Hallisey, and others populated the institutional and command layers surrounding Kyle's individual actions. Their casting prioritized actors experienced in procedural or ensemble work who could deliver functional dialogue and presence efficiently within Eastwood's preferred shooting style of limited takes. Overall, the casting of American Sniper prioritized a combination of transformative lead performance, emotionally grounded family portrayals, cohesive ensemble work among the SEALs, and authenticity derived from real military participants. Timeline pressures and Eastwood's methods compressed decision making into a focused window in early 2014, while Cooper's preparatory example raised the bar for physical and research based commitment across the company. The resulting ensemble supported both the large scale combat sequences and the intimate domestic scenes that together defined the film's dual structure. American Sniper 2014, production development and pre-production. The road to American Sniper began well before Clint Eastwood was ever attached to it. Warner Bros. Acquired the film rights to Chris Kyle's memoir American Sniper, the autobiography of the most lethal sniper in US military history, in May 2012, with Bradley Cooper signed on to both produce and star. Cooper had initially floated Chris Pratt as a possible lead, but the studio's less willingness to move forward hinged on Cooper himself playing Kyle, so he took the role. That same year, director David O. Russell expressed interest in taking on the project, having just worked with Cooper on Silver Linings Playbook. The two never reunited on it, however. Russell instead directed Cooper in American Hustle, and the Sniper Project continued to search for a filmmaker. The search was upended by tragedy. On February 2nd, 2013, Chris Kyle was shot and killed at a Texas gun range by a fellow veteran he was trying to help. Kyle's death at age 38 cast a different light over a project that had already been years in the making. A deal between Kyle and the studio had reportedly taken some 20 months to finalize before his murder. Roughly 3 months later, on May 2nd, 2013, Warner Bros. And DreamWorks announced that Steven Spielberg would direct, with the film structured as a co-production between the two studios. Jason Hall, who had written the earlier drafts of the screenplay, stayed on to executive produce alongside his writing duties. Spielberg's involvement pushed the script in a more overtly dramatic direction. He wanted a clearer external antagonist to sharpen the psychological stakes of the story, which led to the invention of a rival enemy sniper, a fictionalized composite figure who does not appear as a named, developed character in Kyle's book, but who became a recurring foil in the film. Spielberg's input helped swell the screenplay to nearly 160 pages, considerably longer than a typical feature script. Ultimately, though, creative ambition ran into financial reality. Warner Bros. Budget constraints did not match the scale Spielberg wanted for the film, and by the middle of 2013, he had withdrawn from the project over those disagreements. The producers turned to Clint Eastwood, and the fit proved almost serendipitous. Kyle himself had reportedly named Eastwood as his first choice to bring the book to the screen, and Eastwood happened to already be partway through reading the memoir when the offer came in. He finished it and signed on shortly afterward. Before cameras rolled, Eastwood and Cooper traveled together to Kyle's hometown of Midlothian, Texas, spending several days with Kyle's widow Taya, the couple's two children, and Kyle's parents and brother. Cooper later described the visit as a rare and meaningful privilege, an opportunity to absorb details of Kyle's life directly from the people who knew him best rather than relying solely on the page. Preparation for the role extended well beyond research trips. Cooper underwent a demanding physical transformation, adding roughly 40 pounds of muscle to approximate Kyle's seal honed frame, reportedly working up to deadlifting 415 pounds for multiple sets by the end of his training. He trained directly with former Navy SEAL snipers who had served alongside Kyle, including Kevin Latch and Rick Wallace, learning to handle the specific weapons Kyle had used in combat: the .300 Winchester Magnum, the .338 Lapua Magnum, and the Mk 11 sniper rifle. Latch, who had known Kyle since their overlapping deployments in 2006, became one of the production's central military consultants. His involvement traced back even further than the film itself. His wife had reached out to screenwriter Jason Hall years earlier, urging him to portray Kyle's story faithfully. And after Kyle's death, Latch helped connect Hall with Kyle's family and fellow SEALs, later escorting him to Kyle's memorial service. Latch's contribution went beyond advising. He auditioned by sending in an iPhone video and was cast to play a fictionalized version of himself, nicknamed Dauber, in the film. Another former SEAL, Joel Lambert, was brought on to portray a Delta Force sniper. The production made a broader effort to hire people with military backgrounds as extras where possible and put cast members through informal bootcamp style weapons and tactics instruction so that the depiction of SEAL culture and combat felt lived in rather than performed. Principal casting fell into place through March 2014. Sienna Miller joined as Taya Kyle in mid-March, followed shortly by Kyle Gallner, Corey Hardrict, Navid Negaban, Eric Close, Eric Ladin, Jake McDormand, Luke Grimes, and Sam Yeager, among others. Cast and crew were assembled with a tight production window in mind. The film needed to be ready for a Christmas 2014 release to qualify for that awards season, which left little room for delay once shooting began. Filming principal photography began on March 30, 2014, in Los Angeles, with additional filming taking place across California and in Morocco. The production worked to an unusually brisk schedule of roughly 44 shooting days, a pace made possible in part by Eastwood's famously economical directing style. According to longtime producing partner Robert Lawrence, Eastwood typically shoots no more than about 6 takes of a given scene and prefers minimal or no rehearsal, moving quickly from setup to setup rather than dwelling on a moment until it feels perfect. That efficiency was essential to hitting the release date. The film's Iraq war sequences were shot on location in Morocco, primarily around the capital Rabat and the neighboring city of Saleh across the Bou Regre River. Both cities had previously stood in for a different Middle Eastern war zone in Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down, and their dense, sun bleached urban architecture again proved useful for evoking Fallujah and Sadar's city. Eastwood brought a crew of roughly 150 cast and crew members to Rabat for about 12 days of shooting, with the Moroccan government providing military hardware and soldiers to serve as extras in the larger battle scenes. The bulk of the production, however, took place back in Southern California, where sets were built to visually match the Moroccan footage. Chief among these was the Blue Cloud Movie Ranch, a roughly 100-acre property in Santa Clarita, where a full section of urban Iraq was constructed to blend seamlessly with what had been shot overseas. Roughly 10 days of filming there in late April 2014 covered scenes set in an Afghan village as well as portions of the Ramadi tour for the film's climactic Sadr City battle, the sandstorm shrouded rooftop siege that closes out Kyle's final tour. The production moved to El Centro, a desert town in California's Imperial Valley, about 100 miles east of San Diego. There, a defunct milk processing plant along Broadway Street was redressed as the abandoned date factory, where the sequence's decisive standoff takes place. The building had already been damaged by a 2010 earthquake and sat derelict before the production repurposed it. Other Southern California locations filled out the rest of Kyle's story. The Paramount Ranch in Agora Hills in the Santa Monica Mountains west of Los Angeles doubled as the sniper range where Kyle first demonstrates his marksmanship. The grueling Bud SS training sequences, nominally set at the Neva Amphibious Base in Coronado, San Diego, were actually filmed at Leo Carrillo State Beach in Malibu. Seal Beach provided the pier and the bar, recreated as O'Malley's where Chris and Taya first meet, and San Bernardino International Airport stood in for a military air base. A church and playground in the Highland Park neighborhood of Los Angeles were used for the film's early scenes of Kyle's childhood in Texas. Behind the camera, cinematographer Tom Stern shot the film digitally using Arri Alexa XT cameras paired with Panavision CE and G series anamorphic lenses framed in Panavision widescreen. This marked only the second time Eastwood had shot a feature digitally following Jersey Boys earlier the same year, a format shift that gave Stern's photography a cleaner, higher resolution look than the film based cinematography of Eastwood's earlier war pictures. It was also during production that the circumstances arose that would later generate one of the film's more unlikely controversies. A pivotal domestic scene called for Chris and Taya to be filming with their infant child, but according to screenwriter Jason Hall, the first baby booked for the shoot arrived with a fever and a backup baby failed to show up at all. With no time to reschedule inside the production's tight window, the crew substituted a lifelike prop doll for the scene, a decision made under practical time pressure rather than any artistic choice, but one that would resurface as a talking point once audiences got a look at the finished film. Post production editing was handled by Joel Cox and Gary D. Roach, both frequent collaborators of Eastwood's, working to assemble a film that needed to be locked in time for a Christmas season qualifying release. The tight post production runway mirrored the compressed shooting schedule, leaving little slack for reshoots or extensive revisions once footage came back from Morocco and California. The most widely discussed post production issue involved the prop baby used in place of a real infant during filming. In the finished cut, the doll appears clearly artificial on screen, particularly in an extended scene where Cooper's character cradles and rocks it while talking with Taya about his decision to return for another deployment. Because the moment runs well over a minute and involves close, sustained handling by the actors, the artificiality of the prop became difficult to disguise even with editing choices meant to soften it, such as favoring angles that obscured the doll's face or timing cuts around it. The issue did not become a public talking point until the film was already in release. Festival audiences and early reviewers began noticing and joking about it in the weeks following the film's AFI Fest premiere and limited theatrical bow, but the decision itself was locked in well before that, a product of a scheduling problem the crew had to solve in the moment during filming rather than something introduced afterward in the edit. Once the fake baby became a subject of online mockery, Hall addressed the backstory directly on social media, explaining plainly that the crew had been let down by two different infant bookings and had no viable option left but to use the doll. Music American Sniper is unusual among major studio dramas in that it carries no traditional music by credit for an original score in the conventional sense. Instead, Eastwood, who has written musical themes for most of his films as director since Mystic River in 2003, composed the film's central musical motif, credited as Taya's theme. Joseph S. DBZ, who also served as the film's music editor, is credited with composing the additional score music that fills out the rest of the picture, working alongside Eastwood's contribution rather than in place of it. Outside of that original material, the film leans on a small number of carefully chosen existing recordings. Van Morrison's Someone Like You plays during Chris and Taya's wedding sequence, lending a warm, intimate counterpoint to a film otherwise dominated by combat tension. Far more consequential to the film's emotional close is The Funeral, a piece composed by Ennio Morricone in 1965 for the spaghetti western The Return of Ringo. Eastwood selected the piece to accompany the film's closing sequence, a somber montage built around footage evoking Kyle's real life funeral. It was Eastwood's first use of Morricone's music since his 1993 thriller. In the Line of Fire, and its inclusion drew notice from film music observers precisely because it wasn't a new commission. Some fans and critics had hoped for an entirely original Morricone score given his long association with Eastwood's earlier work. But the composer's contribution here was limited to this single archival cue over the credits. Released theatrical Americans, Sniper had its first public screening at AFI Fest in Los Angeles on November 11, 2014, positioning it early in the crowded awards season rollout that studios use to build critical momentum ahead of wide release. Warner Bros. Followed the festival premiere with a deliberately narrow theatrical bow, opening the film in a small number of theaters on December 25, 2014, a limited Christmas Day release designed primarily to make the film eligible for that year's Academy Awards consideration rather than to maximize immediate ticket sales. The wide release came several weeks later on January 16, 2015, when Warner Bros. Expanded the film into thousands of theaters across North America. That expansion coincided with the announcement of the film's six Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Cooper, a combination of awards buzz and aggressive marketing that helped turn a modestly budgeted awards contender into one of the biggest commercial stories of the year, discussed further below. Home Media Warner Bros. Home Entertainment brought American Sniper to Blu-ray, DVD, and digital HD with ultraviolet on May 19, 2015, packaging the film as a Blu-ray combo pack that included the high-definition disc, a standard DVD, and a digital copy. The Blu-ray edition featured 1080p video in a 2.40 baud 1 widescreen transfer with English and French 7.1 Dolby Atmos audio tracks, along with English descriptive audio and Spanish 5.1 Dolby Digital, plus subtitle options in English, French, and Spanish. Bonus material included two behind the scenes documentary featurettes, One Soldier Story, The Journey of American Sniper, and The Making of American Sniper, giving audiences a look at the production process, including the military consultant's role in shaping the film's authenticity. The home media release carried a charitable component. Warner Bros. committed to donating $1 from each qualifying purchase across both physical and digital formats to the Wounded Warrior Project up to a cap of $1 million, running from April 21 through December 31, 2015. Commercially, the release performed strongly. It debuted at the top of home video sales charts and notably climbed back to the number one position roughly 5 weeks after its release, once its mandatory rental holdback period with services like Netflix expired and rental demand kicked in alongside continued retail sales and unusually durable performance for a home video title several full weeks removed from its street date. Reception box Office American Sniper was made on a relatively modest budget, reported at around $58 to $59 million. Modest, at least, relative to what it went on to earn. Worldwide, the film brought in approximately $547 million, split between roughly $350 million in North America and about $197 million from international markets. That total made it comfortably the highest grossing film of Clint Eastwood's directing career, well ahead of any of his previous pictures, and placed it among the very biggest earners connected to the 2014 awards season slate. The film's commercial trajectory was defined by its wide release opening in January 2015, which arrived with far more force than typical January releases, a month industry watchers generally treat as a dumping ground for lower expectation titles rather than a launchpad for blockbusters. Over its first 3 days in wide release, the film earned roughly 89.5 to $90.2 million. And when the 4 day Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend was factored in, that total climbed to somewhere between $105 million and $107 million, depending on the final reporting. Either figure was enough to make it the biggest January opening weekend in box office history at the time, comfortably surpassing the previous record holder. And it stood as the second biggest opening weekend ever for an R rated film, trailing only The Matrix Reloaded. Among Best Picture nominees specifically, only Toy Story 3 had ever opened bigger. The film also received an A+ grade from CinemaScore, an unusually strong audience rating that signaled the kind of enthusiastic word of mouth that tends to sustain a film's box office run well beyond its debut. For Eastwood personally, the opening obliterated his own prior record. His biggest previous wide release debut, 2008's Gran Torino, had opened to about $29. 5 million, meaning American Sniper more than tripled his best prior weekend. For Cooper, it likewise marked the biggest opening of his career in a live action role, a milestone made more striking by the fact that it nearly matched the opening of his 2014 ensemble blockbuster Guardians of the Galaxy. Commentators at the time pointed to a combination of factors behind the film's outsized performance: strong reviews, a swell of Oscar nomination publicity that arrived just as the film expanded nationwide, and perhaps most significantly, a subject matter that resonated deeply with audiences outside the major coastal media markets that typically drive early box office conversation. Warner Bros., own head of domestic distribution, described the film's reach as spanning both politically conservative and liberal regions and cities of every size, a claim borne out by the film's ability to draw huge audiences in so called flyover states that don't always turn out in equivalent numbers for typical awards contenders. Analysts also noted that the film benefited from being a rare big budget wide release treatment of the Iraq War that didn't foreground the war's underlying political controversies, a choice that broadened its audience considerably compared to earlier, more polarizing Iraq War themed films. The film's momentum held up in subsequent weeks rather than collapsing after its record debut, helping it become the top grossing wide release among all films to debut in 2014 or the opening weeks of 2015 up to that point, and cementing its place as the standout commercial success story of that award season. Critical response. Critical reaction to American Sniper on release was largely positive, if not without real reservations. Aggregated reviews on Rotten Tomatoes have settled at 71% positive out of nearly 300 tracked reviews, with the site's critical consensus crediting Eastwood's confident direction and Cooper's central performance for delivering a tense, vivid tribute to Kyle, while also noting that the film sidesteps some of the more complicated aspects of Kyle's life and public record. Metacritic's aggregate score landed at 72 out of 100, in the range the site classifies as generally favorable based on a wide pool of critic reviews. Much of the praise converged on Cooper's performance. Critics repeatedly singled out the physical transformation and the restraint of his acting choices, describing a performance built on quiet, controlled intensity rather than showy dramatics, a marked departure from the more overtly comedic or manic energy that had defined his earlier breakout roles in films like The Hangover. Several reviewers considered it among the strongest work of his career to that point, an assessment that lined up with his Best Actor nomination at the Academy Awards. Eastwood's direction also drew significant praise, particularly for the battle sequences, which multiple critics described as tense and viscerally effective without indulging in the kind of stylized spectacle common to other modern war films. Some reviewers framed the film as Eastwood's strongest and most sustained directorial effort since his 2006-2007 World War II diptych, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. At the same time, a substantial thread of critical response pushed back on the film's handling of its real life subject and the broader war it depicts. Detractors argued that the film smoothed over the more complicated and at times disputed elements of Kyle's own account of his service, and that it offered little context or ambiguity about the war itself, presenting the American perspective almost exclusively and leaving Iraqi characters largely undeveloped or reduced to threat. Some critics characterize this narrowness as a serious flaw, undercutting an otherwise well crafted film, while others read the same restraint as a deliberate, if uncomfortable, artistic choice, an attempt to place the audience inside the tunnel vision experience of a soldier under fire rather than to offer a panoramic account of the conflict. That tension between admiration for the craft and unease with the framings spilled well outside traditional film criticisms once the film became a genuine cultural flashpoint in January 2015, shortly after its wide release and Oscar nominations were announced. Actor and filmmaker Seth Rogen posted a comparison between American Sniper and the fictional Nazi propaganda film shown within Quentin Tarantino's Inglorious Bastards, a remark he later walked back and clarified was not intended as a direct condemnation of Eastwood's film. Documentary filmmaker Michael Moore weighed in separately and more pointedly, posting that he had been raised to view snipers as cowardly rather than heroic, and that invading forces were worse still. Comments widely interpreted, despite Moore's later insistence that he hadn't been referring to the film by name as a rebuke of the reverence surrounding Kyle's on screen portrayal. The backlash to both men was immediate and fierce. Conservative commentators and public figures, including former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and actor Rob Lowe, publicly criticized Moore and Rogan, and Moore reported receiving death threats over his remarks. Other public figures, including Jane Fonda, voiced support for the film in the midst of the dispute. The episode fed into a broader, more polarized public debate about whether the film glorified Kyle and the war he fought in, or whether it offered a more sober meditation on the psychological cost that combat exacts on soldiers. A debate that notably ran along political lines more consistently than the film's actual critical reception did among professional film critics, many of whom praised the craft while still raising the same substantive questions about the film's point of view. The film's six Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Cooper, and Best Adapted Screenplay for Hall, underscored that, controversy aside, American Sniper had been received by much of the industry as a serious, well made piece of work rather than a straightforward piece of hagiography. It went on to win the Oscar for Best Sound Editing. Taken together, the reception to American Sniper reflects a film that was rarely met with indifference, widely admired for its central performance and directorial control, frequently debated for its politics and its fidelity to a complicated real subject, and in the process, transformed from an award season release into one of the defining cultural conversations of early 2015. American Sniper, an old fashioned Western in military uniform. Clint Eastwood's film about Navy SEAL Chris Kyle is on target to become the biggest grossing war movie in history. How did it win the nation's hearts and minds? At some point this weekend, a small but important record will be broken. Since its release in the US 2 weeks ago, Clint Eastwood's new film, American Sniper, has made a little over 209 meters between now and Sunday night. It will, if you ignore inflation, almost certainly become the highest grossing war movie ever, outstripping the $216 meters of Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. This was nothing that anyone saw coming. There was no turbocharged marketing campaign. Its leading man, Bradley Cooper, is a star. But stars don't guarantee box office anymore. Yet, these are the numbers of the superhero franchise, the B-caped summer blockbuster. At a comparable stage, last year's Best Picture winner at the Oscars, 12 Years a Slave, had made 24 meters. Just as significantly, in its second week on release, Eastwood's film barely dipped in popularity, the sign of a collective nerve not just being struck but quivering into the body politic. The response has been mayhem. American Sniper is that kind of film, based on the autobiography of late Navy SEAL Chris Kyle, the most lethal sniper in US military history, who amassed a kill count in Iraq of between 160 and 255. The exact figure is unknowable. So is a lot else in a film whose intense patriotism has caused all manner of baffled commentary, rekindled furies about the Iraq War, and reportedly inspired threats against Muslims. In Hollywood, green lights will now greet a wave of war movies, the film business waking up to a vast new audience. If 209 meters is a dizzying number, try this. In the US, there are 6 million military veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. Put at least some of them in cinemas over the past 2 weeks, and American Sniper's success seems only logical. Learn that more than half still suffer physical or mental health problems and describe themselves as feeling disconnected from civilian life. And you get the sense of a sea of people desperate to be seen and understood. Enter Kyle. American Sniper is his story, though different versions of him appear in book and film, each of them concerned a virtuoso gunman. Only in his own words, though, does Kyle remark that while war might not be fun, I was certainly enjoying it. On the page, he compares killing two men with a single bullet to a scene from 90s slapstick caper Dumb and Dumber. I hate the damn savages, he says of Iraqis. He reads like the braggart younger brother of the noble haunted man on screen and a difficult kind of hero. But something that movies are good at, the kind that make 209 meters anyway, is sanding off a story's awkward edges, making things simple that might not be simple at all. Films veer towards life and death with minimal complications. And Eastwood is nothing if not a great filmmaker. Watch American Sniper and you are rarely ungripped. Certain sequences are breathtaking. Eastwood's work is precise and economical. You can see why he might be interested in marksmen, each shot carefully calibrated, every line measured. Your time is not wasted and your attention never wavers because he always knows just what to show you and, crucially, what to leave out. It's quite a story too. After the hours we spent with Cooper Kyle on his tours of duty, risking his life, losing his mind, seeing humanity in the crosshairs. Only then, and yes, this is a spoiler, we learned that he was shot dead back in America by a fellow veteran with post traumatic stress disorder. Audiences gasp, then sit in silence. When I saw the film, a hush fell over the boisterous young man next to me. As the credits rolled, one turned to another and asked gravely, hold on, was that all true then? Well, it depends, doesn't it? There was, of course, a Chris Kyle who grew up in Texas, married, had kids, and killed many people in Iraq. These are facts. But in adapting Kyle's memoir, there is no mention of Dumb and Dumber. Eastwood also sidesteps Kyle's later claims that he shot looters in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, or two carjackers near his home, or punched the former wrestler and governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, in an argument about the war. These days, all this is put down to self mythologizing, but it hardly squares with the film's modest team player who liked nothing less than personal glory. With Kyle, the nagging question isn't whether what we see is true, it's what, in the name of a good, simple story, has been omitted. Watch the film twice, and even Kyle's post traumatic stress disorder starts to feel fake. A private hell shrugged off like flu. Making the complex simple is a gift, mistranslating it is a problem. But if Kyle, the big screen hero, is some piece of work, Eastwood's War is trixier still. Faced with that stumbling catastrophe, the tactic is again to fillet the film of anything inconvenient. Its opinion on the Iraq War, it shrugs, no opinion. Its politics, none of that either. This, Eastwood has suggested, is just a movie about a soldier and what war does to him. So it ruthlessly narrows its gaze, its perspective, Kyle's and his alone. There can be no reference to the torturers of Abu Ghraib because Kyle wasn't there. Iraqis are either faceless or psychotic, damn savages. But these are choices made by Eastwood, like the choices he makes is in how to light a scene or direct Cooper as he hangs uneasily on camera with real life veterans. The Kyle, whose eyes we see through, is Eastwood's creation. It's Eastwood, not Kyle, who would let an audience believe the architects of 9/11 were hunted in Iraq, that the enemy there was Al Qaeda. Hold on. Was that all true then? In American Sniper, it doesn't have to be, it just has to feel like it. Tantalizingly, Eastwood does offer us one hint of the film he claims to have made, a taciturn Iraqi sniper who becomes Kyle's mirror image. The character is a fiction dating back to when Spielberg was planning to direct the movie. Yet it is as close as it gets to its supposed ambition. Here we have another gifted killer with a marriage, a deadly aim, and presumably a keen sense of fighting for good. If Eastwood wanted to tell a story solely about the warrior spirit, truly divorced from politics, he could have made a film about him. But he didn't. Instead, the death of the Iraqi sniper from a slow mo bullet fired by Kyle is presented like the last gasp triumph of a sports movie. Audiences, as Eastwood knows, haven't really come for an apolitical lack of opinions. What's at stake are American girls, hunting, and cold bros. You want these fuckers to come to San Diego? Kyle inquires. That line arrives in one of the film's pivotal scenes, the kind designed to make it feel nuanced. Kyle is asked by a colleague if he is sure what they are fighting for is right. The response is instant. There is evil in this place, Kyle scowls, and with that he turns and leaves. For his liberal pains, his questioner is killed soon afterward by an insurgent. That's what curiosity gets you. In the world of American Sniper, ours is not to question why wars happen, they just happen like bad weather, and a soldier must fight them. It's an obscene idea. If wars just happen, how can we stop them? Once war becomes an act of God, we make a god of George Bush. Talking of which, for a tribute to Kyle, American Sniper can't bring itself to ask the real question about him. If, as his father tells him, his role in life is to be a sheepdog, guarding the flock, then what does it mean to die because the president cried wolf? Ah, well, maybe such things only worry the politically pinko. Certainly, for a movie without opinions, the American right have rejoiced in American Sniper's success. A cynic might ask if, knowing the strength of feeling still attached to Iraq, Eastwood made the film the way he did to sound a dog whistle to Fox News. But right wing circus acts are not alone in preferring an Iraq war shorn of guilt or complexity. To make 209 meters, you need to pull more than one demographic. So there are the teenage kids for whom the movie must feel like a first person shooter. There are the red state crowds proud of their country. There are, of course, the veterans and their families. When your child comes home in a body bag, it's only human not to want to see their death in some sniggering Hollywood satire. And then there are the rest of us who may simply miss war movies that let you feel you are on the side of the good guys, not lost in a morally toxic fog. That approach has rarely won friends. Catherine Bigelow's Zero Dark 30 had genuine ambivalence and a real sense of what the war involved and got widely beaten up as fascist torture porn. Others who portrayed the conflict while it was happening found audiences sparse. David Simon, co-writer of the Iraq invasion miniseries Generation Kill, said this week of that show's brief life, "I didn't believe for a minute it would pull a number. You make a piece about the American misadventure in Iraq when people still have a taste of Fallujah in their mouths. But now, with that taste less acrid, we and Eastwood have each found refuge in the oldest, simplest character of them all, the cowboy. In American Sniper, Eastwood's own legendary gunslingers find their echo in Kyle, who spent his youth on a ranch riding broncos. A part of his life Eastwood happily reveals. When in doubt, make a Western. In finally consigning Iraq to the past, American cinema has gone back to its childhood, raiding the dressing up box for the Stetson and Sheriff's badge. Pundits think American Sniper will end up making $400 meters. In the movie houses of America, young men and women sit and watch, waiting for the next war to happen to them. American Sniper, war films, Saving Private Ryan, Iraq, film industry, Clint Eastwood, Bradley Cooper features, most viewed. American Sniper takes apart the myth of the American warrior. Here is a one sentence review of American Sniper. The martial virtues are so precious, rare, and fragile that they should be sent into combat only with the greatest caution. Clint Eastwood's new film is political in the highest sense of the word. He dramatizes the use and abuse of state power in the light of great philosophical ideas. These ideas illuminate the drama not as if from afar but from within. They aren't imposed on the drama but arise spontaneously from Eastwood's contemplation of people and events, and they find echoes throughout his career. American Sniper is a movie of violent action, but its action is surrounded by a terrible stillness. Its story of war contains valor and horror, the destructive and self destructive conflicts that are intrinsic to a person endowed with a warrior's noble nature. As such, it's a cinematic tragedy in the deepest and most classical sense of the term. Eastwood considers recent events with fierce anger, even as he considers the universal span of human experience with an Olympian ruefulness, alongside the angelic figure at the center of Richard Linklater's Boyhood, whose Texas youth is unshadowed by wild impulses or unruly thoughts. There's another Texan whose altogether more complex and troubled tale is told by Eastwood in American Sniper, which could as aptly be called Manhood. Eastwood's movie is centered on the true story of Chris Kyle, a Navy SEAL whose lethal marksmanship put to action in the Iraq War was unprecedented. The movie is based on Kyle's 2012 memoir. Nicholas Schmidley wrote about Kyle in the magazine last year. For the sake of clarity, I'll call Eastwood's character Chris. American Sniper starts with military action with Chris stretched out on a roof in Fallujah, gazing at the streets through a rifle sight at a young boy preparing to launch an explosive device handed to him by a woman, presumably his mother, against an approaching Marine convoy. But when the movie cuts to a flashback to Chris's childhood hunting lesson with his father, during which he shoots a deer, it turns into a truncated and telescoped cinematic Bildungsroman telling the story of Chris's boyhood as a sort of founding myth, how an American boy grows up to become a singularly effective soldier. It's a family story that starts with Chris's father teaching him to hunt and discovering the boy's natural gift for marksmanship. Chris is a sort of Mozart of the rifle, but it takes a particular and peculiar confluence of circumstances for him to marshal his talent for something more than sport. From the earliest age, Chris is cast in the role of protector. He defends his younger brother Jeff from a bully in the schoolyard, and Chris's father sets up the scenario in a dinner table anecdote that plays out like country Plato, saying that there are three kinds of people: wolves, predators, sheep, victims, and sheepdogs, protecting sheep against wolves. The metaphor finds its echo in Plato's Republic, in which Socrates explicitly likens society's guardians with their penchant both for ferocity and for patriotism to dogs. In Plato's dialogue, the guardians are put through a rigorous philosophical training, not least on the assumption that they will also be the rulers of an ideally just society. Chris doesn't have a philosophical training. He has Christian faith, a sense of family, and above all, a fund of life experience, albeit one that arises from a very particular tradition. There's a moment early in the film in which Eastwood cues in a glance the impending tragedy. A very brief shot of Chris seen through a doorway heading to rodeo grounds, which borrows from the final shot of John Ford's The Searchers. It's just a touch, but it's a brilliant one. Eastwood marks Chris from the start with his coming isolation. Even in the young man's easy days of sporting adventure, his character bears the seed of the awesome price that he'll pay for his distinction, but it's a distinction that arises from the enduring spirit of the Western, translated into modernity for better and worse. The latter day cowboy has no frontier and no range. Chris comes to realize that for all his aptitude, he is a cardboard cowboy living his life for show, for a kind of showbiz that's low in substance. Chris's sense of self is undermined by his girlfriend's infidelity, a key moment that binds his sense of purpose with his sense of masculinity, and his inchoate sense of higher purpose is aroused by the 1998 attacks against American embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. For Chris, America isn't just a homeland and a sense of self, it's an idea, and Eastwood dramatizes the mounting nightmare of a man of unique talent who is increasingly possessed by that idea. American Sniper is the story of a genius in crisis. It's a movie like Eastwood's Bird, in which Charlie Parker's singular talent comes with a self destructive streak. Chris undergoes a singularly demanding training to become a SEAL. It's physically severe and emotionally brutal, and Chris submits to it unquestioningly and endures its rigors triumphantly until he gets to the shooting range. There, his genius rises to the surface in a scene that has explicitly to do with vision. He dares to contradict his marksmanship instructor's order and proves that he sees more and better than his instructor does. For Eastwood, the military makes a man, which war then destroys. Chris is both fiercely protective of his comrades in arms and furious at what he sees as evil. He sees his mission as both necessary and just, and that very fact renders it all the more painful. He personally doesn't have doubts about his mission, even though he finds others, including his brother Jeff, also serving in Iraq, who do. That sense of righteousness drives Chris deeper into division against himself. The more certain he may be of the justice of his fight, the more ardently he takes the fight to the enemy, despite his keen sense of pain at dealing death and his keen awareness that the more aggressively he pursues his mission and defends his colleagues, the greater will be the sacrifice demanded of them, the greater the likelihood that they'll be wounded or killed. Eastwood greatly admires, even reveres, the warrior, even as he hates war, not on principle, not because it's intrinsically wrong, but because it's intrinsically destructive to warriors, to American warriors. He comes off as righteously angry at politicians who sent Chris into Iraq, not least for feeding him a false story about the national interest, which Chris swallows completely and which ratchets up his furious sense of protecting the American homeland from threats originating in Iraq. Eastwood depicts commanding officers who are out of touch with events on the ground. One is fixated on the use of contractors. Another is leading the counterinsurgency by the book, and another calls Chris onto the carpet for shooting an insurgent, and has a sly contempt for international institutions as well, as seen in several snide sidebars regarding a place in the Olympics for the insurgents' deadliest sniper. But Eastwood doesn't fill the movie with the details of practical politics. He sets up Chris's fighting with a mighty, intensely focused abstraction. The lies behind the rush to war are never explored explicitly, nor is the war in Afghanistan or any debate regarding America's general strategies against Al Qaeda. There's no reference to the torture of Iraqis at Abu Ghraib, to debates over the Iraq War, or to any explicit policy discussions at all. Yet the movie doesn't convey a sense of a whitewash. Rather, Eastwood reduces Chris's situation to its most elemental and shows that even under optimal circumstances, with completely dedicated and professional fighting forces operating under political premises that they believe in, even if the Iraq War were to pass moral muster as a just war and political muster as a necessary one, it would be equally destructive to the soldiers who wage it. And the fact that this war doesn't pass either test is, for Eastwood, a political damnation of the very first order. For Chris, it feels great to shoot and terrible to kill, great to protect one's own, and awful to do what's needed to protect one's own. His quickly mounting count of confirmed kills gets him nicknamed the Legend, and he hates it because he knows that he is being acclaimed for doing something that he knows to be both holy and sinful, too sacred for desecration in vulgar slogans, and too horrific to be celebrated. From the very start of Eastwood's directorial career, Play Misty for Mayor, the conflict between public image and private identity is a morally decisive fault line, and the demagogue who doesn't just have an incidental public image but takes pride in it and seeks to derive advantage from it is a singular villain, a Bible carrier more than a Bible reader. Chris senses that he is defending the faith by violating its fundamental tenets, and that he is being celebrated for the worst part of his service. And even more, that the celebration of warriors reveals the ignorance of the unbearable truth of battle. Even as he becomes one of American society's heroes, Chris becomes, in his own mind, a pariah unfit for society. At the same time, the tormented Chris, returning home between tours of duty, deems society unfit for the likes of him. The very comforts and pleasures to which a family man aspires now strike him as unseemly. The obliviousness of a society that enjoys those pleasures while its most valiant members are fighting a horrific war far away strikes him as a desecration of the sacrifices of those fighters. In the name of their valor, war itself becomes a sort of white whale, a goal pursued furiously and monomaniacally for its own sake without regard to purpose or consequence. On the occasion of the John Huston retrospective at Film Society of Lincoln Center, I revisited his documentary Let There Be Light about Second World War veterans, all young men who were suffering from mental illness as a result of their combat experience. The most moving element for me in Houston's film is one patient's account of a visit from an acquaintance. He says, "Before I come out here to see you, my first impression was like in Bellevue, the fellows from the last war that are completely maniacs." The shocking remark twists the proverb that generals are always prepared to fight the last war. Each war results in disorders of which the next war is a symptom. Each war loses a generation. One era's maniac is in Huston's time suffering from a psychoneurotic disorder. Now, returning veterans are diagnosed with PTSD for Eastwood. They're all enduring the same ailment. War is hell. And those who are in a position to send soldiers into war had better understand that diagnosis. Eastwood includes in the cast of American Sniper soldiers who have been grievously wounded in combat, soldiers who have lost limbs, whose surviving limbs have been mutilated, soldiers in wheelchairs who perform alongside the movie star Bradley Cooper, as casting akin to that of Harold Russell, a Second World War veteran who lost his hands in combat and was fitted with prosthetic hands in William Wyler's 1946 masterwork The Best Years of Our Lives. There, Russell, who had never acted in a movie, is one of the three stars, alongside Dana Andrews and Frederick March. In the course of that drama, it's not Russell's character, but the former fighter pilot played by Andrews, who is most conspicuously suffering from the emotional traumas of combat. Yet the movie that American Sniper most brought to mind was the 2004 documentary Oh, Uomo by the Italian filmmakers Yervan Giannikian and Angela Ricci Lucchi. They present archival footage of the First World War, including images of veterans who were disfigured in combat. The movie includes battlefield footage and images of survivors, military and civilian, as well as the primordial rumblings of the Second World War and fascist Italy's war in Ethiopia in the mid 1930s. The documentarians draw a line from one derangement to another, and so does Eastwood. The wreckage of another generation in the last decade of warfare may well be not chastening but maddening, may terrifyingly bear the seeds of more self destructive violence. American Sniper is an angrily cautionary film, and its anger reflects back to its very title. What's distinctively American about Eastwood's Sniper? He's an accidental warrior, the product of experience. of family and intimate principle, not of a military academy or a hereditary warrior class. Chris knocked about for a while before entering military service. He is not a callow adolescent volunteer or an unwilling draftee, but an adult who brings a formed sensibility to his service, making him both uniquely gifted in the field and uniquely tormented by his actions there. The film's one strange omission involves gender. There are no women soldiers featured in it, but Eastwood strongly genders Chris's idea of the warrior, as in a passing moment when he tells his young son to look after our women, Chris's wife, and their infant daughter, especially given the sexual humiliation at the origin of Chris's military vocation. I'd like to see how Chris's encounters with women in the armed forces inflect his ideas about who needs to be looked after. Eastwood's drama isn't about the effects of a misguided American military adventure on Iraq, but about the effects on America, on the United States' ability to defend itself when the country's principal defenders are laid waste in a needless war. Eastwood's film, without expressly challenging so called American values, raises the question of the abuse of those values in a system that lets armchair warriors send real ones to destruction in vain. He is not diagnostic. He doesn't rise to the issue of whether democracy or its perversion is at fault. Whatever American distinctiveness the title may suggest, there's one thing from which Americans aren't accepted. War is as devastating for them as for anyone, which makes the notion of political and moral exceptionalism all the more potentially self destructive. American Sniper isn't just a tragedy. It's an American tragedy, a vision of American destiny as tragic. Far from patriotic pomp, it's a vision that sees past the still eye of the American self image to the whirlwind. Inside American Sniper, how Clint Eastwood cast a real Navy SEAL. Clint shot bad guys in movies, and I shot bad guys in real life, so let's go ahead and make a realistic move, says former Navy SEAL Kevin Latch about his first acting gig by Brian Poreka. Brian Poreka. Share on Facebook, share on X, Google Preferred, share to Flipboard, show additional share options, share on LinkedIn, share on Pinterest, share on Reddit, share on Tumblr, share on WhatsApp, send an email, print the article, post a comment. Don't use Kevin Latch American Sniper Still Age 2014. Share on Facebook, share on X, Google Preferred, share to Flipboard, show additional share options, share on LinkedIn, share on Pinterest, share on Reddit, share on Tumblr, share on WhatsApp, send an email, print the article, post a comment. Kevin Dauber Lach, a former Navy SEAL who served two combat deployments to Iraq, was ignorant about Hollywood and the filmmaking process. That all changed though when he was brought onto American Sniper as the SEAL technical advisor and was then persuaded by Bradley Cooper to play himself on the big screen. I'm going to tell Clint Eastwood you got to be in this movie, Bradley told Lach at a dinner during the film's shoot. To his surprise, after sending an audition shot on an iPhone with acting aid from the film's writer Jason Hall, Latch was cast in the movie. He notes Clint shot bad guys in movies and I shot bad guys in real life. So let's go ahead and make a realistic movie. In 2006, Latch served for 4 years with the film's hero Chris Kyle, played by Cooper on screen, and the two shared an unbreakable bond. The film ends with footage of Kevin at Kyle's memorial service where each SEAL pinned their trident onto Chris's casket. Latch's relationship to Kyle, as well as his work as a platoon sniper and medic to the most highly decorated Special Operations Task Unit since Vietnam, contributed to his skill set as the SEAL technical advisor for Eastwood's film. Read more: The Making of American Sniper. Cooper told The Hollywood Reporter that Latch, along with advisor Rick Wallace, were invaluable in the process of making the film. That appreciation is mutual, as Latch tells The Hollywood Reporter about Cooper and Eastwood's devotion to the reality of Kyle's story. As SEAL technical advisor, what are some scenes you helped advise that really stood out to you? One of them, which was also my favorite scene to film and to watch back, was the surf torture scene. I showed up on set in Malibu and I had an idea. I was looking at the sites to see what we were doing, and there was no surf torture, which is when you link arms and walk into the water and take seats. You sit there and let the water rush over. I told Jason, who said it was a great idea, and to tell Bradley. So I went over and told Bradley, and he's like, tell Clint. I went and told Clint, and he's like, that's great. The best part was telling the actors we were going to do it. Bradley was stoked to do it, and I swear it, when everyone else found out, it was like you could hear actor spirit dying. I was explaining what exactly we were doing, and I swear one guy's nose started to run just thinking about getting in the water. How did the conversation with Cooper about you playing yourself in the film go? We were training during a 3 day shoot. Bradley shows up and he's straight business. We started shooting a little bit and he's on the gun and I'm coaching him through basic body positions as a sniper, and he looks up at me and says, "Hey man, did you ever think about playing yourself in the movie?" I have an answer for everything, and for the first time, I didn't. I just said, I never thought about that. But go ahead and shoot that target, and we'll talk later. The next night, we were at dinner, and he pulled me aside and said, I'm going to tell Clint you got to be in this movie. How did the first day of filming go? I'm not filming that day. I was just following Bradley around, advising all day. I was literally on him like stink on shit on tire when it was combat and SEAL related. Clint pulls me over and it's raining. He's got his boonie hat on and camouflage jacket, and he asks me how Chris would have shot a guy in a vehicle. I thought about it for a second and said, well, Mr. Eastwood, if he shoots him fast, he shoots like a Navy SEAL, but if shoots him slow. And I made a slow reaching motion like I'm grabbing a gun. And I'm like, do you feel lucky, punk? Well, do you? And Clint is just standing there in the rain laughing. And I'm thinking, this is one moment I'm never going to forget. I can pull a Clint Eastwood line on Clint. And he laughs. Read more Bradley Cooper on how he brought American Sniper to the screen. Describe Eastwood's directing style. Clint is very spontaneous. You'll just be going, and the next thing you know, the camera is there. That put me at ease. I was also working with pretty great actors as well. I thought back to what it was like to be in all those situations, thought about all my senses, and put myself back in time and just went with it. It's also that aura of being around Clint Eastwood that propels you to be better. There's not a lot of fluff with Clint Eastwood. He's a straight shooter. Being around him makes you want to put forth the best product. Clint shot bad guys in movies, and I shot bad guys in real life. So let's go ahead and make a realistic movie. He asked me very early on, Kevin, let us know if it's not like what it was. That was just a man to man talk to make sure the film was as real to the personal story of Chris. How committed were Eastwood and Cooper to the accuracy of the film? I can't speak enough to how much Bradley was locked into this role. I got that from the moment I sat down with him of how intense he is. I thought a lot about questions he'd ask and stuff he'd want to know and prepared answers for him. But Bradley is so inquisitive that he'd fire question after question, and the next thing I knew, I was just giving raw answers, and that's how he learned. He took everything into account to deliver an amazing performance. His commitment to the reality to bring the story to fruition is unparalleled. Then to see him on Broadway in The Elephant Man, he just continues to amaze. Clint was a stud on set. He'd walk through the rubble in Morocco and just command the set. The guy is made for making war movies. Read more American Sniper, AFI Fest review. What was your most memorable moment on the set? When I brought my wife and son on set, it was the birth scene. I was already anxious that I was on camera, but more that my wife would be there watching me, and even more that my 4-year-old son would be running around set. There's also a funny moment from another scene when Bradley is shooting and he wanted to get fired up for the scene. He says to me, I want you to make me mad before I film this. Tell me something that will get me pissed off. I thought of the first thing that came to my head. What Leo's DiCaprio, a better actor? Bradley looked at me all serious. No, say this. That bar scene, you've endured a lot more pain in your career. But what about those darts? I'm just glad they weren't throwing hatchets or throwing stars on my back. There's a certain perception of seals, and I think the bar scene captures it. To be most accurate, there probably would have been a bar clearing brawl. Your nickname is Dober. What nickname would you give Cooper? I'll tell you what I wouldn't give him. I wouldn't say that's the guy from The Hangover. We were filming in Morocco and we're doing a scene, and he goes, Dude, isn't this incredible? And I said, Yeah, it really is. I'm sitting here with the guy from The Hangover. He just got all serious and said, If I just look like the guy from The Hangover, I'm doing something wrong, and walk off. I'm like, oh shit, you might want to call him the legend of filming. He's that good. What was your reaction when you watched the film for the first time? I loved it. I am not going to lie. It's tough the first time you're in a movie, you kind of watch for yourself, but I was fortunate enough to see the movie again the same day and really take it all in. I didn't understand how they filmed it and turned it into what they did, and I was amazed of how complete and real it is. To see Bradley and how hard he worked to be Chris Kyle. When you watch it, you see it. You see the attention to detail and accuracy. To see Jason Hall's script come full circle, and it does Chris Kyle justice. It does justice to the SEAL teams. It's a raw, gritty, and visceral depiction of what modern war is like. Everyone on set put 100%, and the product speaks volumes. Your first red carpet movie premiere. How did it go? If you're going to go to a movie premiere, you might as well go with Clint Eastwood and Bradley Cooper. 8 years ago, when I was in the Navy, going through this in real life, and the next thing I know, I am on the red carpet. It was really humbling. I got to link back up with the guys I shared a brotherhood with: Reynaldo Gallegos, Luke Grimes, Jake McDormand, Eric Ladden, Corey Hardrick, and Bradley. When the film ended with you in the footage of Chris Kyle's actual funeral, how emotional was that for you? I didn't know that was going to be in there. I wasn't prepared. I saw that, and that's the hammer hitting right there. It really brings that reality and anchors that film down and makes it that personal story of Chris. What do you hope audiences take away from the film? It's very easy for people to just say, "Thank you for your service. Good job." Having seen this as a civilian, I think it's important that people come away from this that there is definitely a personal story in each deployment overseas. Some are unimaginable. I want people to take the time and meet with those vets and come away with a different understanding of what guys go through and what they sacrifice and how that's reflected on their home lives. As an audience member, you come away with the idea that each person that goes overseas has a story, and let's listen. Related stories. Mark Wahlberg, Lone Survivor, Actors Road, from movie star to mogul. Related stories. Box office. How American Sniper played like a superhero movie. Related stories. Box office. American Sniper makes history with massive 105.m debut THR newsletters. Sign up for THR News straight to your inbox every day. More from the Hollywood Reporter. Heat Vision Spidey surprise. Brand New Day lands top opening weekend ever with 360M beating Avengers Endgame. Spidey surprise. Brand New Day lands top opening weekend ever with $360 M beating Avengers Endgame. Locarno Film Festival The Green Eyes, inspired by resignation syndrome, opens Locarno with a story told from a refugee child's perspective to try to revive empathy. The Green Eyes, inspired by resignation syndrome, opens Locarno with a story told from a refugee child's perspective to try to revive empathy. The Odyssey Christopher Nolan China interview goes viral over frank views on critics' Christian themes in the Odyssey, being a bard for a civilization at dusk. Christopher Nolan China Interview goes viral over frank views on critics. Christian themes in the Odyssey. Being a bard for a civilization at dusk. Sarajevo Film Festival. Sarajevo unveils open air programs, including Diego Luna's Ashes, Minotaur, and No Good Men. Sarajevo unveils open air programs, including Diego Luna's Ashes, Minotaur, and No Good Men. Locarno Film Festival in Donkey Princess. A young royal travels through worlds and film genres in search of love. Exclusive trailer in Donkey Princess. A young royal travels through worlds and film genres in search of love. Exclusive trailer. Woody Harrelson to receive honorary Heart of Sarajevo at Bosnian Film Festival. Woody Harrelson to receive honorary Heart of Sarajevo at Bosnian Film Festival.